Hi, everyone. Welcome to the afternoon session of the Vanier College Symposium on the Holocaust and Genocide. Today's panel will be, I think, very entertaining and interesting and informative. And I will introduce the moderator for the session. Moderator is Beryl Wiseman. He is the editor-in-chief of the Suburban Newspaper Group and founder of the president of the Institute for Public Affairs of Montreal, a national advocacy organization. Beryl holds 2 law degrees from McGill University and has spent over 30 years combining the worlds of politics, community activism, and media. His involvement in politics includes service as former Minister of Justice Irwin Cotler's executive assistant when he was first elected as an MP. He has won many Quebec and Canadian awards for his work, including the Lindsay Chrysler Award for Outstanding Achievement in Journalism and the Charles Hawkins Memorial Trophy for Best National Editorial Writing. Beryl is a recipient of the Martin Luther King Jr. Legacy Award for the promotion of human dignity, the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for Community Service, the Order of Merit of the Republic of the Philippines, and 2 Canadian parliamentary certificates of recognition for contributions to Canadian democracy. So I'd like to welcome Beryl, who will be moderating this session. Beryl?
Thank you, Marlene. And before I introduce our very, very special guest who really needs no introduction, let me just thank you again, Marlene, for all your work, and Naomi Kramer of the Foundation for Holocaust Education and Genocide Prevention, who started all this 28 years ago. And a special thank you to the Director General of Vanier, John McMahon, who's a superb educator and man who believes in compassion and building character as much as anything else, and has been a mainstay of this symposium. If you don't know Tommy Schnurmacher, you got to revisit your education. I'm going to say something very important about how I feel about him at the end, but let me just go through some of what he's done. Of course, he was a long-time show business entertainment columnist for the Montreal Gazette and the host for several decades. I believe that's right, Tommy, several decades of what to me was the best talk show in the country. Not just for the information that Tommy has in his head, but the courage of his convictions in expressing the opinions and the wit that he did it with. And if you've never heard him, which I hope is not true, but if you've never heard him, go back and hear some tapes. He's also won the Golden Ribbon Award presented by the Canadian Association of Broadcasters and is an accomplished author. His first book was The Gold Digger's Guide, How to Marry Rich in 1985. Canada is not a real country, which frankly, for all its humor, read it. It goes to your political science classes in 1996. And Are We On Yet? Inside Secrets on How to Be Interviewed in 2012. His latest book is a memoir called Makeup Tips from Auschwitz, How Vanity Saved My Mother's Life. It was published last year. It's a remarkable memoir. It's filled with pathos and wit and tragedy and pain and laughter and the whole damn thing. He tells the story of his mother and how 2 notorious Nazis, very well-known Nazis, saved her life, how she got them to save her life, and the impact that had on their turbulent relationship. And it sparkles with humor and chutzpah, and it's a story of cultural collision and delightful dysfunctionality with the growing pains of Stissel, the earthiness of The Simpsons, and the family loyalty of The Sopranos. And you can get this remarkable book on Amazon.ca, and you can find it at all the major bookstores as well, Indigo, Barnes & Noble, Argo, Bibliophile in Montreal. Former Justice Minister Irwin Cotler, one of the most distinguished human rights activists, once said of Tommy that he's an exemplar of political humor. He's more than that. Not just humor. There's a lot of wisdom in his humor. Tommy sits on the board of directors of the Genocide Foundation. Remarkable. His life has spanned remarkable events. He actually spent the week with John Lennon and Yoko Ono at their Montreal Bed-In for Peace. He's covered the Academy Awards 13 times, and he's still proud that Meryl Streep once stepped on his foot in the lobby of the Beverly Hills Hotel. And that's all true. And there's more, and the wit is more. But I want to tell all of you viewing that Tommy and I, besides being friends, full disclosure, we're members of a select club, and that club is the second generation. Our parents survived. And we're born with a particular gene that makes the little hairs on the back of our neck stand up when certain things happen. And it's something that is important for young people to comprehend. You don't have to have it. You don't have to copy it, but you have to understand where our heads are at, how we come to certain conclusions. And with that, I leave you with the one and only Tommy Schnurmacher.
Thank you very much. Thanks for that very kind introduction, Beryl. As Beryl mentioned, this book tells a story about how my mother got two world famous Nazis to save her life. And but it's really more about the impact that it had on our relationship. Now, Beryl mentioned, being the child of survivors. As a child of survivors, right now we're adults, of course. When we were children, you hear about what happened, about how horrendous it was. And as a child, what you want to do is you want to undo it. You want to undo the Holocaust, fix it so that it has a happy ending. Of course, that is impossible. So failing to be able to do that, the next thing that you want to do is you want to make sure they're okay. You want to protect them. You want to become their parent. Now, this is not your job. Your job as a child is to be a child. But as second generation, you want to protect your parents and make sure they're okay. Could you tell them a problem that you had with a neighbor, a problem you had at school? Oh, of course not. How could your problem possibly compare to what they went through? So you keep your issues, you keep your problems to yourself. So you're protective of them. They, having gone through what they did, are mind-bogglingly overprotective of you. And I'll have several examples of that coming up about how they're very overprotective. So that's the dynamic that you live with. Now, going way back, it's the book is a post-Holocaust memoir. It's a story of myself and my relationship with my mother and what she went through and the impact that had. My mother and her sister are walking along a little road, a little street, little dusty little street in Szerencs, which is a tiny little shtetl in Hungary. And they're both complaining to each other that how boring their life is having, that nothing's going on in their life. This is like in early 1944. So a few months later, there was a lot going on in their life. And they found themselves, and if you've studied the Holocaust a bit or read a bit about it, you know about this part, about the trains, the cattle cars used to take people to Auschwitz, to the death camp, to the concentration camp of Auschwitz. Now, this is very important, and it took me years to figure this out. My mom got on a train, and the train took her to Auschwitz. So when you hear that, when you think about that, you think about, a train, you think about when you took a train from Grand Central Station to Union Station in Toronto. You took a 5-hour train ride on CN and went to Toronto on the train. That's not bad, no big deal, right? That in your mind, a train ride, that's what you're thinking. No. It was not that, and it takes a while because everybody does the shorthand, they were on the train. Well, let me tell you what that train was. First of all, there are no seats on the train. It was not a passenger car. It was a cattle car. And they filled it up with as many people as they could possibly fill it up with till they were crowded, standing up next to each other, squeezed in like sardines with nowhere to sit. That was not enough. Then what the Nazis would do is often take young children and babies and throw them, after everybody had gone on, throw them on top of the passengers who were there. The trip didn't take an hour or two. It took 3 to 4 hours in the heat. What was there? Refreshment car, a bar car? No, there was no food. There was no water. There was nothing to drink. There were no bathroom facilities other than a pail in the corner. This went on for sometimes the trip took, they had no idea where they were going. And the trip took 2 to 3 hours. So now are you picturing like what a difference it is from when we think about a train? It was so horrendous that many of the people were dead on arrival from not being able to breathe enough, not being able to sit down. You can imagine what the toilet facility, what that was all about. So it was horrendous in and of itself. So that's the ride, the train ride itself. When you get there, my mother was young, and fit, and so she, when it finally arrived, she got off the train, and even she was at Auschwitz, at the death camp. She didn't know exactly what it was, but she was so happy not to be on the train. In other words, now there was like air. There was like air you could breathe, and there wasn't somebody 1 inch from you in the front, the sides, and the back. So, and what does she see? They're guards, Nazi guards with dogs and guns, and they're telling people to go in this line, go in that line. And she sent in a line to a desk, and at the desk is seated a man in a white outfit. His name is Dr. Joseph Mengele, one of the most notorious Nazi war criminals. And he's the one who's making life and death decisions by the thousands. Like he's making one every second. You to the right, you to the left, right to the left. What is one direction? What's the difference between being sent in one direction, being sent to the other direction? If you're sent in one direction, you're going to the gas chamber. And if you're sent to the other direction, you are sent to labor camp. You'll have to work in the camp in Auschwitz. Again, I just used the phrase gas chamber, right? So you thought of train. I explained the difference between the train that you and I would take and the train that they were on. Gas chamber, well, you learned what it is. You've heard what it is. People are crowded in, and gas comes in, and then they die. Right? And again, that's a sanitized version. That's the cleaned up version of it, right? It's not the sort of patiently waiting there. Then it's a shower. They've been told to remove all their clothes, hang them up, remember where they put them because they're going to go get them afterwards. That's what they're told. That's the lie they're told. They go in figuring all naked now. Imagine the humiliation of every men, women, children, many of them religious, etc., horrified to be walking around naked. They walk into what they think is a shower. Then the lights go off and it's dark and they don't know what's happening. They start screaming and yelling inside. And then what happens, the gas comes in from the top, and it takes 20 minutes for them to suffocate, and the people on the top collapse onto the younger people on the bottom. So again, it's more horrific than whatever it is you thought it was. So how did my mother survive all this? Not only survive all this, but thrive. Now, her parents, she was told, were gone. They were killed in the gas chamber. She felt she had nothing to live for, and she was being told, really, by the Nazis, you are nobody, you are nothing, you count for nothing, you are zero, you have no value, you have no meaning. This is the sort of the message she's being given. And she is saying deep within herself, no, that's not true. That's not who I am. I am somebody. I do matter, and I care. Now, how can she say that to the Nazis? How can she express that she does count? How can she express this right there in the middle of a death camp, in the middle of a concentration camp? This is where the title comes in. The title of the book, it's called, as you can see it over my shoulders, Makeup Tips from Auschwitz, How Vanity Saved My Mother's Life. So what are those makeup tips? They're not really makeup tips. When she got there, and I've described to you now what the train ride is like. When she got there, and she was chosen to go to the labor camp section, and she arrived and she's given the prison uniform, my mother doesn't like it. She doesn't like what the uniform looks like. It doesn't fit right. So what she does is she takes her daily ration of bread, exchanges it for needle and thread, and fixes it so the outfit now works. So now it looks good. It fits her better. The shoes, her black shoes were dirty. She didn't like that either. So the swill that they served as coffee, instead of drinking it, she uses it to shine up her shoes. Then she takes her nails and scratches her chin and rubs it, so now looks like a little bit of blush. She looks young and healthy. Her dress fits her, and she's got shiny shoes. So morning roll call. Every morning, the Nazis would count how many Jews they had in the camp, how many prisoners they had in the camp. morning roll call, 5 a.m. Everyone's in lineup, and this woman called Irma Greza, on whom they based the character Ilsa She-Wolf of the SS, is going through the lineup, and the women had told my mother, don't do anything to stand out. If you stand out, you're in trouble. And my mother ignored what they said. And so Greza notices her and says, you, out of the line. So my mother comes out of the line and she says, how can a Jew look like this in a place like this? That's what she tells my mother. And my mother just answers her, tells her the truth of what she had done with the coffee, what she'd done with the needle and thread. And so Greza says, in that case, you're going to be my valet. You can be my servant. So my mother ended up being her chichkas, her valet, and she was in charge of tending to her garden, polishing her boots, polishing her bicycle, cleaning her bicycle, and that is how she survived the war. And this woman, Greza, said to her, as she got to know her, your parents are gone. Do you have any siblings? My mother told her she had a sister. She says, how old is your sister? So age, where did she come from? Well, then she's here in the camp, and the Nazis had such impeccable records. They knew that her sister was working in the Canada section of the camp. They called it Canada because it was very wealthy, and this is where they looked at all the goods, all the stuff they'd stolen, the watches, the jewelry, the money, anything that people had brought with them and in their suitcases and they'd taken from them. They sorted all that out in this Canada section. So Greza took my mother to meet her sister for 10 minutes during her time at Auschwitz. So my mother survived and was liberated at the end of the war. 10 years later, right, they lived in Hungary. She went back to Hungary, where she met up with 2 or 3 siblings that had not been killed. 4 siblings were killed, her parents were killed, nephews and nieces were killed. And she gets back there and she lives in Hungary under communist rule. Then there's the Hungarian Revolution, and her sister in Montreal says, you've got to get out of there now. And she sends somebody to go get us in Budapest, my father, my mother, and I, living in a small little apartment in Budapest. And we're told in the middle of the night that we have to leave. And we're going to drive to a muddy field. And if you keep walking across this muddy field, you get to the Austrian border. Again, this is not a stroll through a field that happens to be muddy. In this field are landmines strategically placed so that people would not leave the workers' paradise of Hungary and escape during the commotion of the Hungarian Revolution. Now, the guy who planted these landmines has a nice little sideline. He hires himself out to families to help them cross the border. They pay him money, and he will take them around this muddy field and know where the landmines are to avoid it. There are all kinds of Russian patrols all over the place. Now, before we left the house, my mother told me that we couldn't take much. I could only bring 1 toy. I was like 5, 6 years old at the time. We could only bring 1 toy. I had 2 toys that I liked. I liked a wooden streetcar and a mandolin. Now, I thought, well, the wooden streetcar really doesn't do much, but the mandolin, I'm going to take the mandolin. So I take the mandolin with me, and we're crossing the border, and I decided, since, that we're all walking through this muddy field, nothing interesting, nothing much to do. So I decide to strum a little on the mandolin. Well, the guide who's taking us across the border is not too pleased with this, as you could imagine, because if the Russian guards hear us, then we are going, if the Russian guards hear us, we're going to be shot to death. So he takes the mandolin, smashes it over my head, and thus the end of my musical career. A third of the way through, this guy says he's tired. The guide says he's tired. He wants more money. So the 8 or 10 families were there, give him some more money, and we continue. Halfway through, he wants still more money. So we give him that more money. Then just before we actually get to the safe part where we're actually on Austrian territory, he says, all of your money. So we arrived. We'd taken some money that we tried to save, etc. By the time we arrived in Austria, not a penny. Now, My father had been told that the streets in Canada are paved with gold. So there's no point in bringing jewelry or anything of the kind. But fake plastic was very rare in Hungary. Like, can you imagine what that is? Imagine artificial plastic. Like, imagine what real plastic is. This is artificial plastic, just rolls of like cheap linoleum type thing. So he brought a roll of this valuable commodity with him, which was worthless over here. So that's how we arrived in Austria. Now, then we took a plane, a very rickety old plane. It stopped in Iceland, it stopped in Greenland. We arrived in Moncton, New Brunswick, took the train, and someone picked us up at the train station. We're driving in Montreal. We arrive along Sherbrooke in front of the rotted gates, and I see what they are. They look very nice, these circular pillars. I said, "What is that?" And they said, "Well, that's a school for big children." And I said, "Well, when I'm a big child, I want to go to that school." And it's McGill University, and I did end up going to that school. But what did it take to get there? And I mentioned before what happens with Holocaust survivors. Their experience doesn't end with the Holocaust. Their children who are never there in the Holocaust still are paying the price to some extent, and it still has an impact on them. We arrive in Canada, and after a few months, it's a cold January day, and my mother says that it's too cold. I can't go to school. Why not? It's too cold. What do you mean it's too cold? Way too cold for a child to go out in this weather. I said, "What are you talking about? All the other kids are going to school. Why are all the other kids going?" She says, "Because Canadians don't love their children." That's her response to that. Now, again, trying to be like I remember my first day at school. I went to Bancroft School. I didn't speak one word of English. Everybody gets a piece of paper. I get a piece of paper. Everybody gets a pencil. I get a piece of pencil. And the teacher's talking. I have no clue what she's saying. And then people are starting to write something. But what are you supposed to write? I don't know what you're supposed to write. So I look beside me, and there's a girl sitting beside me. And she's picking up her pencil, and she's writing in the upper right hand page of her piece of paper. She's writing M-A-R-I-E. I said, "Oh, okay, I understand." So I get my pencil and I write on top of my paper M-A-R-I-E. I have no idea that's her name. So what happens is the teacher gets 2 pieces of paper from Marie and none from me. Now, I spent a year at Bancroft School. By the end of that first year, I now knew how to speak English. And a few years later, I decided, all the kids like playing hockey. They go skating, they play hockey. So I'm going to do that too. So my father buys me a pair of skates, and we're off to Kent Park, and we're about to, and I'm going to learn how to skate, and then eventually I'm going to learn how to play hockey. And my mother says, "Okay, he will go skating, and he will be on the ice, which is slippery, and he will fall, and he will crack his head, and it will crack the skull, and some of the brain will come out, and the blood pink first, and then lots of blood, then more red, deep red blood in the eyes." As she's saying this, of course, I put the skates down. I'm going nowhere near the rink. I don't want to hear about it. Nothing can convince me to go anywhere near the rink, because obviously this would happen and it would kill me. So I do not know how to skate. I never learned how to play hockey. To this day, I do not know how to ride a bicycle, and I've never gone bowling. All of these extremely dangerous pursuits, as my mother pointed out to me. Again, this has to do with the fact that she's a Holocaust survivor, because she thinks that the worst can happen. If you live in Canada, most probably the worst won't happen. It never happened before. Why would it happen now? But in her case, the worst that can happen happened. It was worse than you possibly thought it could be. It was worse than that. If a relative left to pick up some groceries, they might never come back and they might have been killed. That wouldn't be an absurd thing to think about. That would be possible. So now when I have friends who are supposed to be there at a certain hour, and they're supposed to meet me at 2 and they're not there at 2, doesn't mean they were delayed or there was traffic or anything like that. If they're not there at 3, that means obviously they were killed. They had an accident, they're dead. You catastrophize, you leap to the worst possible conclusion. That's part of being second generation. That's part of being a child of survivors. the over protection is just astonishing. My mother was walking me to school. If I hadn't one day when she came late decided to walk home on my own, we lived like 3 blocks from school, she'd be walking me to CJD. She would never have stopped. Now, in high school, I won a little scholarship, and what that was a $10 gift certificate, and you could buy books, a $10 gift certificate from Eaton's department store at the time downtown, and you could exchange it to buy books. And my friend Howard, he also won one. So his mother said that she's going to take the 2 of us right after school. She's picking us up in her car at school. We're going to go downtown to Eaton's and cash in our gift certificates, our scholarship gift certificates, and buy some books. So far, so good. Howard picks a couple of books, so do I. Driving home in the car, and Howard's mother has the radio on in her car. She's listening to CJD, and there's a mention that Tommy Schnurmacher has been missing for a week. What? She says to me, where have you been all week? I said, I've been home all week. I've been to school all week. Where would I be? She said, why are they saying this about you on the radio? I said, I don't know. So she brings me home. She rushes up, knocks on the door, and Mom says, oh, thank God he's alive. And Miss Carol, Howard's mom, says, why are they saying on CJD that he's been missing for a week? Mom said, did you think if I tell them that he's missing for 2-3 hours, they're going to send the police to look for him? And she later told me that the only reason she didn't call the RCMP is because she couldn't spell, she couldn't find their number. She didn't know how to find their number. Again, that's the level of overprotection. When I put her in a cab, I wouldn't trust the cab to take her where she was going. I'd get in the cab with her, go to the destination, make sure she got in, and then I'd come back in the same cab. Again, all part of that same overprotection business. It was just a very important part of. I remember once I wanted Beatlemania, the album, and my father said, "Well, I give you your allowance. Buy it out of your allowance." I said, "I don't. I spent it already." Well, take it out of your allowance next week. Please, Daddy, please, please, please. So he says yes. He gives me the money. Again, this is also part of the second generation. They can't deny, their children are so precious to them, they can't deny them anything. He could have said, to teach me the lesson about it, say money, wait till next week and get it next week. No, too sweet, too kind, no boundaries, hands me the money. I buy Beatlemania. Now, as he got older, I became very, so again, the overprotection comes in. I'm overprotective of him. Wherever we go anywhere, I say, Daddy, okay, Vaj. That's half English, half Hungarian. Okay, Vaj, are you okay? Are you okay? And I'd ask him that, and he'd say, yes, he's fine. And then 5 minutes later, I'd ask him again, Daddy, okay, Vaj, are you okay? Okay. Fast forward half a century. He passes away. And a year later, I'm out at the cemetery in Dollard and visiting his gravesite, and I'm looking at the tombstone and thinking about him and saying, Daddy, okay, Vaj, are you okay? As I say that, the entire cemetery starts ringing with the sounds of Beatlemania, one of the songs from Beatlemania, Please, Mr. Postman. And then another song, and then another song, then the whole album. I stood there by the gravesite listening to the music of Beatlemania inside the cemetery in Dollard. What the hell was that? And what it was is there's a public swimming pool adjacent to the cemetery. It was a hot summer afternoon. They're having an afternoon beach party, and they play music at the beach party. And the song they happened to play at that particular second was a Beatles song. And for some reason, people wanted to hear the rest of the album. They played the whole album. The amazing part about it is that this came up when I asked that question, Daddy, okay, Vaj, are you okay? And I felt maybe this was some kind of message in some way of, because that was such a beautiful memory I had when he gave me the money. I gave him such a big hug. I was so thrilled. It was such a happy moment between the two of us. But I just brought up that story just to show the closeness and their inability to say no to their children. It was also my mother's experience. What I learned from her is to be resourceful. In other words, no matter what the circumstance was. When I was a little kid, I found out that I lived near a place called the Jewish Public Library, and I found that if you were a kid, you could join this library for 5 cents. And if you paid 5 cents for a year to be a member, you could get 3 books to read for free. and you'd get 2 weeks to read them. You could bring them back, and then they'd give you another 3 books. So I thought even then that this was a fabulous deal, and I had a nickel already. So off I went to the Jewish Public Library and plunked down my nickel and said, I'd like to join the library. Sure, here it is. Here's the card. Just get your parents to sign it. Now, this was around mid-morning. My parents were gone for the day. I didn't want to wait. I was so excited. I was in the library already. I could see the books. I was so excited. So I don't know, other kids might be, disappointed, and they figure, okay, they'll come back later. No. Also, you want instant gratification, which is also something that you learn from your parents. Food that's coming in an hour or two might not exist. Something, a benefit or a pleasure or something good coming in an hour might not happen. You have to have it immediately. You have to have it immediately. If you don't have it immediately, you might never get it. So again, I want to be a member of the library. I want to have my 3 books right away. I want to have them immediately. So what am I going to do? I have to get their signature. I go downstairs to the corner of St. Urban and Mount Royal and ask every adult I see to forge my mother's signature. One after the other says no, till I finally find a lady with a long, long ponytail, looks very friendly. I talk to her and I tell her of my plight. I tell her exactly what happened. Please. But now I'm really sad already, so I lay it on a bit thick that I want to get this card. So she signs it, and I spell out the name, S-C-H. I slowly spell out the name, forge the signature, and I have my card, I have my 3 books. Again, the resourcefulness that I picked up from Mom. They sent me to a day camp, a sort of a Hungarian little, not the day camp that you would know about, more like a sort of amateur one, like a family ran it. They had a little bowling alley, a couple of bunk beds, and all kinds of activities during the day. And I hated it, and I didn't want to stay. But this was in Valmorin, it was in the Laurentians, it was 50, 60 miles from Montreal. So what did I do? I walked to the highway, and I walked to a gas station, and people would stop for gas, and then I'd look at them and see if they were friendly or not, or dangerous looking or not. And I figured that the least dangerous would be middle-aged couples. Husband and a wife, middle-aged, would be who I would be aiming my bit to. So I see them come in. The man's filling up the gas. The woman's going into the gas station to get something. I stand outside just as she's coming outside and start crying that my parents left me here. We came up to fill up gas and they forgot me and they drove off. Oh no, she feels dreadful. Oh, where do you live? I said, I live in Montreal. I live on Clark and St. Joseph. She says, don't worry. We'll take you there. We'll take you. We'll give you a lift. They give me a lift. I get home. My mother can't. What did you do? How did you get here? Like I said, and they said, you can't. That's terrible. Don't do that again. It's good for you to go to camp, etc. They take me back to camp again. Now I know how easy it is. This is like no big deal at all. I go back, do the same thing again, like 3-4 days later, and then my parents decided that obviously I won that particular battle. Again, this has to do with resourcefulness. Another example of resourcefulness I picked up from Mom. I lobbied her to take me to New York City. And I'm 14 years old. We get there, here's all the trains at Grand Central, and says, oh, war has broken out, let's go home. I said, there's no war, we're not going home. And we start walking with the luggage, not the things that you roll on the sidewalk, things you have to hold on to and schlep. We're walking towards the hotel on 7th Avenue and 42nd Street. Mom sees a store, and the store sells brassieres, only brassieres. She's never seen anything like that in Hungary, never seen anything like that in Montreal either. She said, I'm going to go in there and buy something. She goes into the store. You wait outside. I wait outside. She goes in, gets a bra. We walk, get to the hotel. She immediately takes her bra, goes into the bathroom, puts on her bra. And then a few minutes later, she comes out. The bra's back in the plastic bag. Didn't fit, wrong size. Could I please take it back? Even as a 14-year-old kid, I said, I don't know if they're gonna take it back. oh, please, you know where the store is. So she sends me out, age 14, in New York City for the first time ever. No GPS and no cell phones, no nothing. I find the store, I get to the store, and I said, my mother was in here just a while ago, and she bought a bra. It doesn't fit, it's the wrong size. Can I return it? We don't give refunds on bras, kid. I said, sir, are you the owner of the store? He says, yes, I'm the owner. The store has been here for 30 years. I said, in the 30 years that the store has been here, have you ever had a 14-year-old boy come in and try to return his mother's bra? He says, no, I guess, oh, no. So he laughed, thought that was very funny, and got the refund. Again, that's part of the issue, the whole issue of resourcefulness. I took my mother to the Oscars. I took my mother to the Academy Awards. Again, I felt bad that what had happened to her. How could I fix it? How could I undo it? How could I make her life better? I took her with me to the Academy Awards, and I had a press pass, and my friend Denny from Associated Press, she had a press pass and said, Tommy, I'm just covering the arrivals. Some other reporters covering the whole event. You know what? As soon as I'm done with the arrivals, here, I'm almost done with it now. Take my pass and give it to your mom. So here's mom with Denny's pass and me with my pass, and we're watching everybody arrive and the celebrities arrive for the Oscars. Then all of a sudden, Denny comes back and said, the reporter covering the main event canceled. He got sick, can't come in. So she says, sorry, I have to have my pass back. So mom gives her the pass back, and now we only have one pass, and I wear it and I take it off, and then I give it to her, and then she takes it off her neck and gives it to me. And then a 6'4" LA cop comes over and said, okay, which one of you is Tommy Schnurmacher? And my mother says, oh, officer, I'm so sorry. He is Tommy Schnurmacher. He has a press pass. I don't have a press pass, but I will go home alone by myself in dangerous Los Angeles. Don't worry, I will be. Okay, she starts sobbing, etc. So needless to say, he puts his arm around her and escorts us over to the red carpet where we can see everybody arrive in perfect shape. Again, to make her life better, to make up for what she went through, I took her with me. I was a journalist. I covered the Oscars for the Gazette, covered the Cannes Film Festival for the Montreal Gazette. I take her to the Cannes Film Festival, and we go to the casino. And I tell her, I said, Mom, I said, when you cheat, when we play blackjack at home and you cheat and hide a card and things like that, it's cute, and Dad and I find it funny. Over here, if you do it at the casino, you go to jail, a French jail. It's not nice. So she behaved, no problem. Took her out to a great restaurant in Moulin de Mougins. She couldn't understand why we're taking a cab to a restaurant when there are restaurants right near the hotel. I said, no, it's a very special restaurant. We get there, and she sees the actor Omar Sharif was standing, famous actor standing in the corner. I said, no, you can't go over there. You can't bother celebrities like that. It's not, they're here for their own purpose. And while I'm explaining this, of course, I'm explaining it to her back, because she's already gotten up and is walking towards Omar Sharif. I'm so embarrassed I can't look. I said, look in the other direction. What are they going to do? They're going to throw her out. I look over. Omar Sharif is getting up. He's going over to another table. He's getting a chair, bringing the chair over. She's sitting down with the group now. And the next thing I see is Omar Sharif's hand, right, is in her hand. And my mother's busy looking at his palm. She's reading his palm. What's fascinating about this is she knows nothing about palm reading. She's never done palm reading at all, but she obviously kept them entertained long enough. Again, in terms of overprotective, she said, I want you to buy me a dog. Elizabeth Taylor has a dog, a Saltese. I want a Saltese. I said, it's not a Saltese, it's a Maltese. So we got a Maltese. I got her the dog, Bijou. She loved it, was barking. All the neighbors didn't like it. Côte St. Luc police came over and said that, why is your dog bark? And Mama says, because it's not a cat. So my father said, please get rid of this dog, which I took it to the SPCA. I knew the head of the SPCA. Please get this dog adopted. If not, don't kill it. I'll take it back. So now it's safe. It's going to be adopted at the SPCA. I come home and visit my parents. I hear a dog barking. I open up the door. There's Bijou. What happened? How did he get back here? What did they do? My mother took a cab, went over to the SPCA and saying she wants to adopt a dog. Which one? So she says, that white one. So they take Bijou out of the cage, who sees her, recognizes her, runs, leaps into her lap, and Mom says that she saved him from the death chamber. She saved him from there. I once went to a Holocaust museum in Atlanta, and told her, my mother always told me this Greza had looked like Ingrid Bergman, and she said, and so as I'm looking at the small museum they have, I see some sepia, brown and beige pictures, and I look at one of them. One of the women looks like Ingrid Bergman. I look underneath, and it says Irma Greza. Wow! So I call up, Mom, guess what? I'm in Atlanta. I went to the Holocaust Museum. I saw a picture. I saw a picture of Greza, the Nazi, the woman who saved your life. What do you think? She says, oh, you're in Atlanta. Did you also go to CNN, and the Coca-Cola Museum is in Atlanta? So she had already moved on and gotten past that. As she got older and older, I'm going to get to read a little bit in a second. As she got older, I went to visit her at her retirement home, and the one wonderful thing she did, which she always would tell me at the end of the visit when I'd say goodbye, I love you, she'd say, have a good life, have a good life. That was her basic message. And myself, I'm not a joiner in particular, but I'm on the board of directors of the Genocide Foundation, which makes sure that the subject of genocide and the Holocaust is taught in Quebec schools, because it is truly horrendous. At one of our meetings, we had somebody from Rwanda. You think it never happens again, and there was another when there was the genocide in Rwanda around 25 years ago. The Holocaust built up over a number of years. The one in Rwanda was practically overnight. You had there was and the guy's telling the stories. He thought there was fireworks. It wasn't a fireworks. A politician's helicopter had been blown up, and he was staying at a friend's house, and the parents seemed quite worried about it. And the next day, their neighbors came in and said, well, you're another group, Tutsi and the Hutu, you're another group, and we have to kill you. Do you want to be killed by a bullet or machete? Like from one day to the next, they're neighbors. So that's why it's so important, I think, to study the subject. And that's why I'm so honored to have been invited to speak to you. Now, let me read you, how are we doing time-wise? We're okay time-wise? I'm going to read this little bit, and then I'll take questions. Is that okay? Okay. So this is called, this chapter of the book is called Soft Pink Candy. Candy was a big issue during my early childhood. In Hungary, you rarely got candy, and when you did, you would take it out of the colorful paper wrapper and suck on it until you got to the soft, gooey part in the center, which was very sticky and very sweet. This entire operation would only take a minute or two at the most. Not here in Canada. I discovered that kids in this country seem to favor a special soft pink candy that they would be able to chew on for hours. I didn't know where these special candies came from or what they were called. I had no idea where to get one until one day when I was standing outside during recess, being ignored by the other kids who were all running around and playing games that looked incomprehensible. I noticed a flat piece of special candy lying right there on the ground. Wow. Mom and Dad were always saying Canada was a great place. They were right. Here in Canada, you don't have to be a good boy and wait for an adult to give you a candy. Here, candy grows wild on the ground. All you have to do is look around till you find one, scrape it off the ground, and voila, Canadian candy, and you can chew it first. Once when Mom was walking me to school, she was horrified to see me pick up something from the ground and pop it into my mouth. What are you doing? I'm picking Canadian candy. It grows on the ground. Are you crazy? Spit it out this minute. Mom then took me to the corner store where I had my first piece of gum that had not been previously chewed. Mom told me never again to pick up gum off the floor, and she handed me the pack of Wrigley Spearmint gum, which came individually wrapped. As usual, Mom was right, and I told her as much. The Wrigley's gum she bought me was much sweeter than the gum from the ground. Now, before we get to the questions, one last little story. My parents lived in a duplex. They were the landlord. They lived downstairs, had tenants upstairs. And one day they got a call My mother gets a call, and it's the tenant. It says, Mrs. Schnurmacher, there's no heat. I'm complaining, there's no heat. My mother says, move to Florida. The tenant calls back, I'm serious, there's no heat. Well, don't walk around naked like a hooker and close the window. Still not over. The woman calls the police. The police arrive. They knock on the door. Yes, Mr. Schnurmacher, we have a complaint. What's the complaint? Your tenant says there's no heat. What are you? The heat police. Go catch a crook. And my father perks up and says, who was that at the door? My mother says, somebody selling chocolate. Thank you.
I just unmuted myself. I was talking to you and I went, oh, Tommy, Bancroft, Clark and St. Joseph, Nelson and St. Joseph.
Wow.
No skating. Nothing. We're not skating. And that, to everybody who's listening, to all the attendees, to one extent or another in every family, is true. And if they weren't that overprotective directly, they fed it into your head.
Mm.
I have a Canadian cousin, and family worked very hard. They did very well. He was born here. Tommy was born in Hungary. I was born in Russia. And every time I worry about something, and not because necessarily I remember my parents saying anything to me about fear, but it was by osmosis. So every time I worry about something, my cousin will say to me, there's his refugee mentality coming back. And all this is what we lived with, and we carry it forward. Remarkable. You didn't go to the Jewish Public Library at Mount Royal?
Yes.
Where Bobby Fischer played chess once.
Yeah, Mount Royal and St. Urban. Yeah, that's
Okay,
where I got.
That was the one.
That's where I got the forgery. Yes, indeed.
Tommy, this was wonderful. And of course, one of the participants today wants to know, when are you going to have an audiobook of makeup tips?
Okay, I've been asked that question a number of times. It's a matter of whenever I decide to stop procrastinating.
It's going to be your voice.
Yes.
Okay.
It takes me a long time. Like when I wrote for the Gazette and I was on CJD, if I have a deadline, I show up in time. I get an article in on time. If it's for a newspaper, I'm there at the radio station on time when it's a radio show. But when you're writing a book or doing an audiobook and you are your own boss and you have to decide when it's going to be done, you can keep delaying it. Right beside me, I have a bookshelves, around 40, 50 books only on the subject of writing. It's not that I learned so much about writing from these books. The purpose of these books is to have something to do so as not to write. I'm like, what I remember what Dorothy Parker said, I hate writing. I like having written. I like when it's done already. Like I don't like doing Zoom.
White and Theodore Bernstein, everything's up there.
Yeah, I like talking about it afterwards. Once the book is done, and I can just pick up a copy and read you some of it's all done. But I'm going to have to get around to it because a number of people have been asking for the audiobook. So I'm going to have to find my way to set up some kind of artificial deadline, and then I'll do it.
And then, of course, you have to look on your special bookshelf with the books about writing. You have to look at the books of your favorite authors to get inspired. Yeah. And then, of course, you get into that choice part of the book that you couldn't live without, like A Movable Feast and A Royce Gavor for the writing. But Tommy came up with a brilliant way to write this book, at least the rough part of it. And we would all go to his page every day to look for it. He decided to use Facebook as self-discipline. And he promised all his followers and friends that every day, or every 2 days, correct me if I'm wrong, Tommy.
It was every day. It was every day by noon.
Every day by noon, there would be a new part of the book, not necessarily a whole chapter, but a new story. And it was like waiting for your favorite columnist in the good old days of newspapers for the paper to arrive at the door. And the first thing you did was you opened it to the column, and then you read the next adventure. I read your book, listened to your talk today, and really enjoyed it all. You speak right with humor. Any resentments about your upbringing?
Yes, of course there are. There's some of the things that you were not allowed to do makes you felt like an outcast because you're very different first of all, coming here as an immigrant, right? You're different. You don't speak the same language that other people do. So the resentment comes from that. And some of the resentment comes from my mother would tell me that it's my job to make her happy. And what your mother tells you, you believe. Now that sentence that it's your job to make me happy is incorrect. It's not. Your job, after a few decades of therapy, you find out, no, it's, as a child, it's not your job to make your mother happy. It's your job as a child to be a child. That's the only job you have, really, as a kid. When my mother took me to New York, most parents, when they take the kids to New York, and I'm sure that many of you that happens, they're thinking of something you can do while you're all in New York. The family's in New York, your parents are going to do something, but they want to do activities that the kids themselves will enjoy. When I went with her on that trip where I went to the brassiere store, well, she went to the brassiere store, she wanted to go to New York for one reason, and that was to go shopping. She wanted to go to Macy's and Gimbel's. And at the time on 34th Street, they had like dozens of dress shops that all had a sign in the window. The sign said, all dresses, $5. And she did not want to leave New York till she had seen every one of them. So the deal she made with me, for every 10 dress shops that we went to, I could get to go to one museum. Okay. So we went to around 20. So she owed me 2 museums. We went to the Museum of Natural History. And after she took a picture of me next to a cigar store Indian, she said she'd had enough of this museum and let's leave. And I never got to the second museum. So do I resent that kind of thing? In a way, yes, that I never got to see more museums, but in a way, no, because I've got a great story to tell about it.
Resentment plays into it. Again, you know, you're told the story about Marie, who's sitting next to you, and you just wrote her name. So when I went to Bancroft, we went from Russia to France, where most of my family was. I was very happy in France. I didn't understand why we had to leave France to come here. So, and I think I was 7, and we're driving from the airport, and it was not an easy acclimatization, but my first day at Bancroft. So my mother, of course, took me there. She wouldn't let me walk alone, even though it's 3 blocks away.
That's right.
And she had to give me a warning, right? I'm sure you got to be careful which kids you play with, because they're strangers. They're not like us. They're not from our.
Oh, no, I got worse than that. Don't play with any of the kids. Not be careful with. In other words, you could select a few. No. They're all bad. They like, instead of all people are, good and there are some exceptions, her message basically all people are bad and there are some exceptions. So you are like kind of suspicious, but in a way she was very overprotective. If I couldn't understand the concept of you have to get a note from your mother, right? What does that mean? Like I could get her to write a note about absolutely anything.
You get a blank check.
Like if I said I don't want to go to school Wednesday, I said okay, and so she'd write the note. And other kids, their parents wouldn't do that. And when I mentioned this to her, she thought that the other parents were cruel. And she offered to forge their parents' signature for them because she felt sorry for the kids. When I had an argument with the teacher, she never, ever, she wouldn't even wait to hear what it was, never sided with the teacher. And I was once told I talked too much in class, which later ended up as a career, so it was okay. But the teacher told me I have to write, I must not talk in class 500 times. Remember in those days when you had to write lines? Right. And so when I told my mother this, actually I started doing it. My mother saw, what are you doing? Why are you writing the same thing over and over again? And I told her what it was a punishment. She takes the pencil out of my hand and she sits down and she does it. She writes out the 500 lines and at the end signs it with a flourish with her signature. I take it into the teacher and the teacher says, no, it's not your mother who's supposed to do it. You're supposed to do it. And so I tell my mother that. I said, we can't get around it. She says, yes, we can. She sat down and wrote, I must not talk in class 500 times in a childish handwriting and made a point of not signing it the second time. So again, there's the pro and the con, but our parents made us what we are, the good side and the bad side, and they did the best they could under the circumstances. And given what they had gone through, I think they did pretty well.
Did you ever get this kind of, before I get to the next question, did you ever get this kind of reverse protectionism, so she said, don't be careful who you play with, don't play with anybody, go to class, go home. Except that I only spoke Russian, Yiddish, and French. Everybody at Bancroft, even Jewish kids, spoke English. And the ones who harassed me the most were the English kids. So I we fought. So I came home and told my parents, particularly my mother, about the fighting with the English Jewish kids. And she says, no, there must be something wrong, but they're Jewish. They can't do that to you. You must have misunderstood. Did you get any of that? That made me crazy.
No, yeah, no,
She's telling you,
didn't get
don't
that,
do
but
anything.
What I got,
Sorry.
yeah, no, I didn't get that, but what I did get is, again, a way to being overprotected, thinking the worst could happen. I found various ways to avoid trouble. Like I knew who the bullies were, so I had to figure out how do you avoid the bullies. This went on even in high school. I noticed one day at Northmount High School that the teachers.
By the way, a couple of years after Northmount High School, Bancroft, Northmount.
Okay, so there,
It's scary.
so then you know Northmount very well. There's an entrance on Lavoie, an entrance on Bouchette, right? Those were the two entrances. You go one or the other. Now there are bullies parked at one, and you weren't allowed to use the main entrance. You had to use the Lavoie exit. So one day I noticed that the teachers used the back exit to go to the parking lot, right? And first you're probably not supposed to do that. So, but I figure I'm going to try it. And I go out and I notice that the parking lot leads to a laneway. You go out the side and you can leave school with and not see any of the kids, the bullies hanging out in front of the school. So that became my exit plan to get out from, get out of the school.
Now here's a question again. By the way, if any young people want to ask a question, please type it in English or French, whatever. And the reason I'm saying that is because this question goes to a generational issue. So Tommy, this question is, what do we have to do to make sure that younger generations remember these stories with history being taught so badly or not at all?
I think that's why I'm on the board of, directors of the Genocide Foundation. And that's why you have seminars and symposiums like this. Because people will hear it, they'll see it, they'll tell other people about it. That's the only possible way to do it, to keep talking about it and talk about the conditions that led to it. Like what happens first. It doesn't, chambers didn't spring up overnight. It starts with demonization and blaming other people, and whatever problems you have are not your problems. They're the fault of that guy who's a different religion, who's a different color, who's a different race, who's somebody different, who's a different political party, and that political party is evil, and they're all horrible. When you see, it's the ability to spot that kind of demonization when it's not that, like when we had the disagreement, like a serious disagreement, political disagreement in Canada, of separatists and federalists. At the time, this was about the breakup of Canada. I was a staunch federalist. José Legault, a friend of mine, was a staunch separatist. We argued, we didn't agree with each other on anything. She was to the left, I was to the right. We remained friends because even though she was completely wrong in my mind, she was a human being, and vice versa. Even though I was completely wrong in her mind, I was a human being. What happens is when you lose, so in Canada, we have that even if we argue, liberals versus conservatives, NDP, as they argue, they still see the humanity of the other side. Whereas I think what's happening in the United States, it's gotten much, much worse, where the two sides can't comprehend how the other side could possibly do that. Either side can't understand the other one. And gradually, they're not even human anymore because they're so, quote unquote, horrible. And you've got to get past that and say their argument, what they believe in is horrible, that you're free to disagree completely with the opinion of someone else, and of course you should, but you have to, and this is I think what has to be taught at all levels, elementary school, high school, university, college, anywhere, is the person who disagrees with you shares your humanity, right? That they share. You have that in common. You have you share that humanity. And if you keep that in mind, then it makes the demonization more difficult.
Tommy, thanks so much for being here.
So much. This was terrific. I loved it.
You're one of a kind. Remember the book, Makeup Tips from Auschwitz, How Vanity Saved a Mother's Life. Get the book. It's not just a fun, warm, wonderful read. This is life lessons that we all grew up with. Tommy called the title of his presentation of Memories of Mom and Mayhem. And of course, his mother had enough mayhem before she got here. But the way we were all brought up in that generation, there was a little bit of personal mayhem that still is in our heads till today. Tommy, big hug, big virtual hug, big hug on kids.
Thank you, everybody.
And,
Thank you for joining.
Marlene, I turn it back to you. Where are you? There you are.
So I just wanted to thank both of you. Beryl, thank you for moderating the session.
Pleasure.
Tommy, thank you for presenting your story in an entertaining and an important way. Students don't hear enough of this, so the more they can hear it, the better off I think we will all be. So thank you both very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take
Take
care.
care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.